Now, South Africa won't have a food security concern if government and logistical role players work effectively to find alternative routes to the ports that have been affected by the KwaZulu-Natal floods. That's the view of agricultural economist Wandile Sihlobo. The president last night highlighting in his speech that the province serves as an entry for imported food products. It's also known for producing various agricultural products such as milk and sugar. Well, let's discuss this now with the chief economist at Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, Wandile Sihlobo. Wandile, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. In your opinion piece, which I have read, you make the point that KwaZulu-Natal does make an important contribution to our food security. I just want to start with the first aspect that you raise around production. What is KZN responsible in terms of producing in our agricultural sector?
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. KZN is an important province in South Africa's agriculture sector. But I think the challenges that the province faces at the moment do not put the country in a point where we could say there's a food security risk. The province produces a number of products, but I would say of significance, for example, it has roughly 30% of South Africa's dairy head. You also find that about 80% or so of South Africa's sugar production is there, and you will find about 12% or so of eggs and poultry and piggery is produced within the province. In all of these entities, we're not yet sure now about what the scale of the damage as a result of these rainfalls. So that's something that we are still trying to uncover and figure out what the challenge is. But in as far as the larger part of food production in South Africa, it happens and is processed largely in other provinces of the country. Hence, we're saying in the near term, we're not as worried about the national food security concern as a result of the crisis that is in KZN.
The president last night expressing a bit of a view around the Durban port, describing it as one of the largest and busiest shipping terminals on the continent and vital to the country's economy. From your assessment, because we import some food products through that port, what are the risks there? What could the impact be?
The president is right, Dan, on his assessment. The port of Durban is important for us and for much of the continent. And of course, for South Africa's agriculture, it's important both for imports and exports. As you will recall, Dan, we are a country that is export-oriented in as far as agriculture, exporting about half of what we produce in value term. That's on an annual basis, a value of around about $12.4 billion. But in the near term, of course, the key issue are the delays that have been at the port. But I must commend here then colleagues at Transnet and the others in the logistic entity, because over the past couple of days, they've been able to make sure that there's starting to be some operations happening in Durban. Despite the disruption that had been happened at the Bayhead Road, they're still rebuilding that in the information that we are receiving, but there's beginning to be some bit of movement. That enables the offloading to an extent of some products and, of course, some processes that might be related to exports, but still at a very low level. But I think it's an important movement. In as far then as your broader question to say what will the impact be, I think in the near term, it's really on the delays that everyone is experiencing. But I think the logistics entities and likes of Transnet I mentioned, they are trying to make sure that we get some steam going in as far as that is concerned.
So how important then is it in the short to medium term, the effort or the need, as you say, to find alternative routes? How important does that become? Knowing what we know now, that, I mean, the destruction was quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key things in the near term is to say, if the Bayhead Road is as disrupted as we know it now, have seen in the pictures, there must be some construction. We know from the colleagues on the ground that they're doing some work on the Bluff Road within the Durban to ensure that they can access the terminal in the near term. That will assist us a lot because we are heading now to a busy period in as far as agricultural exports. Now we will be a time where we're sending out a lot of citrus to the world. particularly beginning around about May. The hope is that within the next 2 weeks or so, there could be really some good clearing up, at least on ensuring that the ports are accessed fairly well. And in the information that we are receiving, we are confident that if the momentum continues for all of those that are on the ground on ensuring that they are rebuilding all of the disruptions related to the ports, we could be able to see just a temporary disruption and be back in the market. But again, this is something that then we are monitoring and getting information an hour by hour, but it is a critical concern.
Yeah, I mean, a few months ago, I spoke to you during the start of the cyclone season when we were seeing a lot of rain falling in the eastern parts of the country. And there were concerns that too much water is also not good for crops. Excessive rains, not good for crops. You taught me that here on eNCA when I spoke to you a few months ago. This time around in KwaZulu-Natal, which crops could be excessively affected by these rains in the fact that they might completely be lost by now?
Yeah, I mean, KZN, as I mentioned earlier, Dan, that we have sugarcane, 80% of South Africa in there. We have a bit of fruit also there. So those are some of the crops that we are looking at. But of course, also looking at the soybeans and some areas that grow maize, even though not really in large proportion in the KZN, to say what the damage will be. So far, it's really the assessment underway at the moment.
Yeah, the roads, are you concerned about how quickly the roads can be restored? I mean, some of the main routes that are used. The Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Patricia de Lille, on the ground today, speaking a little bit earlier to our colleagues there who are covering this and saying they are very urgently trying to get that aspect moving, because, I mean, those routes are very critical for the movement of goods.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Then those roads are critical, and it links with the same story that I was mentioning of the ports, to say the rebuilding and reopening of those roads will be important. But then I want to make an important point here of the roads, not only for KZN, but across the country in South Africa. The recent rain have exacerbated the poorly maintained roads across South Africa, especially in the farming towns. And this is one of the most important things that I think when we think about rebuilding now, not only KZN, but the rural economy in South Africa, we really need to pay attention on saying how do we maintain these rural roads, because they are key for tourism, agriculture, mining, and many other things. Many of us experience the highways, but there's a lot of disruption that has happened in the small towns. And I think we need to have some form of a comprehensive strategy of dealing with that in South Africa, beyond KZN, but really across the country.
Okay, finally, just to recap, it is your view that in the short to medium term, the risks to our food production and the food security are not that big at this stage, but we are still busy assessing.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what we're currently busy with now, but we're still comfortable that there will be sufficient supplies for everyone in South Africa. And we also in a year where we have good production of a number of crops. It's just the delays in exports and imports of some of the products in the near term.